Well, I'll tell you about Jacob. I find that the older he gets, the creepier. Anyhow, Jacob was a guy who came to this country as a teenager, all by himself. I don't know why, because most of the immigrants in the early 1900s usually came with family. Perhaps it's because he was the only one they could afford to send over, and he was running away from the Russian army, as so many did. He came here with nothing, without the proverbial pot, as they say, And I don't know what happened, because they rarely talked about that time. There was this intense need to be Americanized. My parents, who both were born Russian, never spoke Russian at home, except when they wanted to say something that the kids weren't supposed to know about. They spoke some Yiddish, because that's the only way we could communicate with my mother's parents who were here. But mostly, they desperately wanted to learn English. It was very important for them to be American early on. Dad never had any education. He was the old self-taught guy. He learned to read and write English on his own. I don't know how, because he had very little time. He was busy earning a living. He had no skills. He did what many of the early immigrants did like him. He opened a little store, a little candy store in Baltimore. And it was successful, and it grew and became another store ultimately. And there was some accumulation of wealth. Not a lot, because Dad was never after that kind of stuff. He wanted money because it drove the family. It was what was most important to him, his family. I tell people sometimes, I'm a counselor in high school. Sometimes I tell kids at school, the day I was born, I knew I was going to go to college. There was not a question of whether I would go, it was which one I would go to, because my family knew that I was going to go to college, as my brother would. Not my sister, by the way, because in those days it wasn't that important. Anyhow, my dad, Jacob, he taught us a lot. Not by what he said, because we didn't have time for a lot of conversation. He worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for many, many years. Many, many years. We didn't have dinner conversations. It was impossible. Somebody always had to be in the store. So either Mom was in the store or Dad was in the store. We learned from him by what he did. He didn't give us sermons. He didn't talk about the things he really felt about. He was probably a socialist, although I don't think he knew it. He certainly was, well, I guess next to God there was FDR. I mean, that was, he was number one. Number two. But family was more important than anything. He was a pacifist in many ways, although when the Second World War came, he certainly wasn't. He was gentle. He was the arbiter. He was the wise man of the family. Not his family, because he was the only one. But my mother's family, of which there were many. My mother was one of 8. So there were a lot of problems, feuds, arguments. And my dad was the guy who arbitrated. He was the one who was depended upon to keep the level head. He was the honest guy. He was the principled guy. He was an amazing guy for somebody who really didn't take Sociology 101 or Psychology 201 or any of these things, And that's what I wish for you, Jacob. The kind of morality that he had, the sensitivity. I hope you're a bleeding heart liberal like that. Like we are. And I wish you a happy and long life. Your turn.
I'm going to talk about my grandpa Charlie, his name is Mister, who is my mom's dad. And unfortunately, my mom is 94, and she's still moving around and running around, but unfortunately shouldn't be here today. And otherwise, she would have told you all about her dad, and that would have gone on for at least an hour and a half. So she's glad that I'm talking about my grandpa, who was a terrific guy. He died about his late 70s. At the time he died, he was traveling all over the world, taking all kinds of trips. He was a photographer. He was one of the early photographers, and we have photographs that date back to the New York World's Fair that we've saved. And he had darkroom equipment, which I think we had for a while. And he was just a terrific, terrific person. He was also, in some ways, there's some parallels between Mel's dad and my grandpa, because he was born in this country, but he had to quit school when he was in 6th grade, and he was really a self-educated person. He had the most beautiful script. I mean, I have letters to me that my grandpa wrote, and it's the most unbelievable script that nobody ever learns anymore. And my mom says that he always carried a dictionary around with him, so he'd know, he'd have to look up a word. And he was also always the poem writer. If he'd have been here today, he would have made up a poem that made up of like CHARLES. We had one going at our wedding. My mother has one that she remembers with her name in it. So I think he was just a wonderful, wonderful person, and we're really pleased that he can hand down his genes and all to this Charlie. Now, he's descended, Mel reminded me, he told me I should say this. My grandpa and us and Dave, we're all descended from a very, 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 very famous Jewish scholar. The Gaon of Vilna, who's Elijah Ben Solomon, right?
Direct descendants, right.
Direct descendants of his. And so this is another thing, another gift, in a sense, to Charles. I can't think of anything else to say.
I would like to say one more thing about the Vilna Gaon. When David went to Hebrew school, his Hebrew school teacher could not believe that he was a direct descendant of the Vilna Gaon. He couldn't believe that anybody could be such a lousy scholar. Do you remember that? Mar Magalit, right? But he's a good guy.
The rabbi probably knows. I mean, probably a lot of people here don't ever heard of it. Right. And probably a lot of people here may not know that. Right.
Yeah.
Did you know who the Gaon of Vilna was? No. The rabbi's impressed.
It's class, though.